Vacancy Legal Recruitment, a refreshingly unique and personal talent agency developed specifically for legal. Dedicated to the sector and with extensive experience working across legal services and legal technology, we bridge the gap between your requirements and top-tier legal talent. Get in touch today and say hello at vacancy.co.uk.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. Today we're talking about how we can solve the ills of the conveyancing industry. I have Travis Scholes, Commercial Director at LMS, on the podcast with me, and we're talking about the launch of the National Property Transaction Network. It's a new piece of technology that LMS are, I think it's fair to say, investing heavily in. Travis, look, I mean, it's facetious of me to say that we're going to solve everything through something like this, but it's a bit of a start at the very least.
I hope so. It's certainly taking a lot of time and attention at the moment, so definitely.
Well, before we get into what the National Property Transaction Network is, shortened to NPTN, tell us who you are, Travis, and what you do at LMS, please.
It's a very existential question for 10 o'clock on a Monday morning, David, but thank you. I'm Travis Scholes. I'm the Commercial Director at LMS. I've been with LMS best part of just over 5 years now. My job is very much to engage with the market, understanding new products and services that we can support in as part of the LMS product offering, and ensure we create good relationships with all the stakeholders in the process so we can do things like NPTN, but more importantly, support our core products and support our customers the best way we can.
Let's dive right into what the National Property Transaction Network is. To give us a synopsis of what the technology looks like and what you're trying to achieve, Travis.
Yeah, I suppose I was going to simplify this the best way I can. It's an enablement platform, I suppose, more than anything else. So if you look at the last 30 years of LMS's history, what we've managed to do is to build an ecosystem of different actors and stakeholders in the process who all consume a product or service via LMS, whether it be our paneling proposition, which connectivity to the large amount of law firms in the country. One of our lender products, we've got obviously products specifically for brokers and surveyors and all those type of things as well. What NPTN is trying to do is to create a centralized place where all those different actors can talk to each other and share information in a way that makes sense, in a way that creates efficiency in the process. So we can really improve the customer journey and really focus on deduplicating all of the data entry points and the administration that goes along with that, with the process that we all are heavily involved in and know and love in the home buying selling process, create more transparency, and we do that through a shared network of information. Our job as LMS is to create that network, that enablement platform that all those different actors can come in, input information, surface information, and share it to the people who need it. So in a very, very simplistic way, that's what NPTN tries to do. I suppose how we got there is probably really equally important. If you look at the last 10 years of the home buying and selling process, and particularly probably the last 5 actually, were more relevant. The level of digital maturity that we've seen in the individual silos of the process has been quite astronomical. You know, before we click record, David, we're talking about new entrants to market, new prop tech starting up. Every single different product and service that's consumed in the home buying and selling process has independently gone through a level of digital maturity. We've got much more digital products. We've got access to better digital data. Each stakeholder group has done very, very well at maximizing the digitization of their individual element. What's missing is a singularized place where we can share that information and make the best use of that digital maturity that's taken place. So we take ID as a really, really good product as an example here. 5-6 years ago, if a law firm needed to see your ID, you went to branch, you brought your passport along, your driver's license, a couple of utility bills, and off you go. The level of maturity in that product now, we've now got 20, 25 suppliers who may be feeding information from 3 or 4 of the big guys and reselling it, but ultimately they're enablement platforms. It means we can do that stuff digitally now. As a result of that, we're still doing an ID check 4.5 times per transaction via the broker, the estate agency, the lender, the conveyancer. That information is possible to be shared. And if it can share it in a way it can be trusted, that we can start removing that kind of from the process and making sure that that first check that's done is a check that's used through our entire process. And ID is a really good example of where individually we've had a great level of digital maturity. However, we're not using that and enabling that downstream to make efficiencies throughout the process.
I've had a number of these conversations through the course of the podcast in recent years, and a lot of them have focused in on this change to the transaction, or attempts to change the transaction and introduce material information at an earlier point in the process. I think at this stage it's quite important to say that this isn't specifically a material information play, is it? This is a connectivity play.
100%. And our job is to enable best quality supply. If I look at the market and look at some of the reasons why these things may have not had the traction that I would think deserve in the past, it's because the level of adoption and change has been too heavy. The burden to change based upon closed loop systems, based upon having to work in a certain way or having to use a particular material information provider, all that stuff it's just a bridge too far. They look at that effort versus resource versus return. And for large parts of the community, you don't have large tech teams or can't invest in this technology heavily. It's quite a big burden to ask. LMS are very, very well placed that we have a level of connectivity. We're already a trusted source for information. And our connectivity is not just with law firms and lenders, but with vendors as well. We've got good connectivities with the CMS platforms and suppliers of different products and service. If we can create an open loop system where people don't have to choose and change supply, but we can enable them in a way where they can continue to do the things they're doing today, but just use that information in a better way and make it more available and more trusted to other actors in the process, then that's the first starting point. And actually, I suppose when I talk about this in the market, I talk more about evolution rather than revolution. We're not trying to change the way that people work and change everything about what they do. Our job is trying to maximize what they do today in a way that makes sense for everybody else in the process. And I think that's the main difference. I think that's why we think we're in a good position to support on this, but actually we're also not silly enough to think we can do this by ourselves. This is very much about enabling best quality supply. The people that the law firms, the lenders, the estate agency brokers want to use, finding a way to get them in a singular platform. And that's what we're trying to do, rather than fundamentally change what happens day to day. Now, material information is a really good example of a new innovation that's coming into the process. We've got trading standards at the front end saying, estate agencies have to do this, and they're going to start enforcing it at some point soon, if not already through the portals. What all that did is serve as a motivation for estate agents to go, well, actually, if I'm going to do something slightly different, collect more information, what's the best way to use that information and use that additional burden or responsibility that I've got to create a better process for those downstream? That's why there's been so much focus on material information or upfront searches or upfront information, which includes your protocol forms. It's because there isn't actually a new motivation now to change the process. So if we do have a data collection point at the front end, and that data collection point is now digital, i.e. there's digital suppliers who can give us that information and serve it to the consumer, why can't we find a way to use that? Why can't we find a way to pass that downstream? And that's where LMS come in. We're the ones with the connectivity. We're the ones with an ecosystem that can push and surface information to large segments of the community. And that's what we're trying to do. Enable those best quality suppliers. Enable those changes and those motivations in a way that makes sense for the home buying and selling process.
You talk there about closed loop systems, open loop systems. This is interoperability, isn't it? This is getting the whole raft of organizations, as you say, that go into the home buying process to try and work together. Now, there have been some very harsh commercial realities behind this, and what you've seen, as you quite rightly say, is a number of organizations have done something similar, but they've said, look, you have to do it within our own ecosystem. Why? Do LMS feel as though that you can do this commercially and it remain open? That seems to be a really challenging concept for the sector.
I don't really want to focus too much on what everyone else is doing in the market. It's their product and service, and they're attacking it the way they see fit. I suppose from an LMS point of view, looking quite internally, over 30 years, we've created the ecosystem, of the level of connectivity we're talking about, where for new entrants into the space, they probably need to create that level of connectivity to make these things work. Ultimately, this comes from volume. The more people work in this kind of standardized way and share information, the more powerful it becomes. And that power becomes from connectivity and interoperability. The more people that use that singularized platform, the more powerful that data becomes and the more efficient the process gets to. If we get to a point where we're starting to affect change, as an example, because everyone's working in the same way, then completions will happen faster, not just exchange, as an example. I suppose where LMS sits and what we've done over the last 30 years is we've created a platform where people consume LMS products and services. And that's been financially kind of viable for us as a panel manager and kind of what we do. What NPTN is trying to do is decouple the LMS product and service from the network. So the network still exists. And the products and services that people consume from LMS can sit completely independently of that. And what we're left with is this kind of open ecosystem that's connected to large parts of the organization, large parts of the process. Now, if we can do that, there is ways to monetize those things, but actually, I don't personally think, and I think I speak on behalf of LMS and a lot of people I speak to in the market, that actually you can do this without enabling supply. You can't force people down a certain route. Law firms have long-standing relationships, as do lenders and estate agencies and brokers. Without enabling their ways of working, you are putting up roadblocks to adoption. The only way to take down those roadblocks is to very much enable supply. How do we kind of re-engage with the way they're working today, and just use that process differently, maximize it, supercharge it, if you will. But as soon as you start asking for fundamental levels of change, process slows, it stops and it stalls because it becomes too big and becomes in a too hard box for a period of time, and you got to figure another way to do it. Where we are, because of our core products and services, because of that existing ecosystem, we can attack the problem slightly differently. And as a result, that's why we've gone open loop. It will cost more to build that way, without doubt, without shadow. We've got to engage with larger segments of the organizations and that exist within different stakeholder groups. But that's the price to pay to make this work. I think that's pretty simple. That I don't think there's another way it can be done, to be honest.
The announcement of NPTN came not long after LMS confirmed that they were working with Houseful, the parent of Zoopla. Again, just kind of talk me through how that marries up. You've got your own network, but then you're also looking at supporting other networks that are out there as well. And as you say, I appreciate you're not going to talk about the competition, but this is somebody that you're working with.
100%. I think it's a really good example of interoperability. I kind of said before, David, I don't think we're silly enough as LMS to think that we can tackle and solve this problem by ourselves. This is going to take a whole industry effort. Zoopla have Houseful, I should say, have a really strong market share in the estate agency and portal space. They're a wonderful business, and they've done very, very well in terms of creating their own ecosystem that exists upstream. And they have different strengths for LMS. So working with those is a good example of where different platforms and different ways of collecting information and engaging with customers can work together to create a better process. I hope Houseful will think this as well, but I think both Houseful and NPTN are stronger as products by working together rather than working independently of each other. And I do think that opens up a whole world of opportunity in terms of how we explain interoperability to the market and collaboration. A view of the future where you can access NPTN via a movement Houseful product and vice versa. And that becomes quite exciting. That accesses both to a level of the market that we wouldn't get or we have to spend so much time and money going to achieve. Those two organizations and those two products will serve each other very, very well by working together rather than opposing each other. And the announcement in terms of working with movement is a really, really good example of where we looked at our technology stacks. We looked at where we're both strong and found a way to found a middle layer or a middleware where we can kind of share information to each other that promotes both platforms and pro services and enables them to be slightly stronger than they were independently of each other.
Are we trying to digitize a process that is fundamentally flawed? Do we need government intervention to implement regulatory change? We've talked about material information and some of the regulation that may well come down as a result of that. But we're talking at a time when, despite the technology that's there, home moving times have lengthened.
You're absolutely right. And I spoke before around the individual elements of the process digitizing over the last sort of 5 years in particular, but they don't talk to each other. Those different products and services are completely independent. That digitization is happening in isolation. What we're seeing now via the likes of the Property Data Trust framework and things like NPTN and you mentioned movement before, horizontal layers of integration, finding a way to bring those individual products and services together into a singular transaction, into a singular place, into a single shared data repository. And I suppose that's the biggest innovation that's come out of the market in the last couple of years, in my personal opinion. We now have a way of enabling these different products and services to talk to each other in a way that makes sense for the stakeholder. To your point around, can we digitize a process that fundamentally is broken in your words? I don't think I'm brave enough to say that on a podcast, David. I think it's about the building blocks and the steps you take along the way to HDA or horizontal digital integrations and networks. A big bang approach where everyone has to stop what they're doing today, completely change everything, adopt a new way of working and go again. I just think it's impossible. And I think where a lot of the feedback from the market has come back and it's like, you've made this a really, really big job and too big in terms of I can't do my day job and look at this stuff as well. Because we're kind of reusing a lot of the existing LMS infrastructure, because we're focused on interoperability and enabling existing supply, I think we can make those steps towards a new process smaller, more obtainable, and without huge levels of cost or massive blockers to adoption. So rather than think about a big bang approach to change, LMS's approach is to look at take small steps along the journey. And actually, we need to engage with the different stakeholder groups as much as we have done in the past, and probably even more moving forward, to ensure that every step that we take benefits those stakeholder groups. Feedback from all those different actors in the process is what will make this work. And we need to understand where the next pain point is, what supply needs to be kind of enabled, how we do that, what information needs to be shared, what's the best way of doing that. All those questions, and we're deep in conversations with the large segments of the market right now, need to continue. And every time we release value into the process, we ask the question again, what's next and what's next? And we take small steps over a longer period of time, we will find ourselves in a very different way of working. But it won't be LMS's way of working. It'll be the industry talking together as the users of this product and service every single day, directing travel. They'll tell us what we need to do next. They'll tell us what we need to enable, and we'll take those steps based upon that customer feedback. And we'll take that very, very seriously. So we'll make that path to adoption as easily as possible and be very much user-led on that journey.
Linking into that then, today's Conveyancer as a publication for conveyancers tries to look at the impact on the practitioner that turns up in the morning, and we know often is there 7:30 in the morning trying to get a title check done or review the searches before the phones and the emails start going. And they are working hard day in, day out to keep the home moving process working. And we're also talking at a point in time when, of course, the SDLT exemptions for first-time buyers are coming to an end, and there's an uplift in volumes. How do you anticipate that we are going to bring conveyancers along with us on this journey? And I'm not just talking about the big boys that have got the resources and the technology there and the ability to plug into some of this. I'm talking about firms on the high street who are there day in, day out, trying to serve their clients as best as they can, but without the resources that they may need to get involved in this journey.
So I think you mentioned at the start of the podcast, David, about the resources required to kind of go and deliver something like this. People are investing heavily in this way of working. Where our resources are going to is making this easy. How do we make the adoption curve as simple as easy for the length and breadth of the stakeholders in the process, from your high street conveyancers to your independent estate agencies and your one-man brand brokerages, your tier 3 lenders. So they all got very, very different needs. And where people are focused on API integrations or even more kind of serious and strenuous levels of connectivity, there is different ways to surface information. And actually anything that we build from an NPTN will be very much focused around accessibility. How do we enable even the smallest parts of the process to work in this way? Ultimately, and I kind of touched on this before, unless we get a critical mass of people working in the same way and get this kind of standardization piece sorted, these processes have minimal benefit to the overall transaction times and the overall customer. An individual customer will get a better experience because they might have a singular customer journey and their data gets reused and they have a great, but actually they don't move house any faster. Because there's somebody in the chain who, still wants an ID check done individually or collect their own information. So we have to enable all parts of the organizations and all shapes and sizes to work in this way. And we do that again by reusing the LMS ecosystem. These small organizations that you spoke about, these high street conveyancers, log on to LMS every single day and collect information from lenders. They use our services, redemption statements. It's like we're already a trusted source. They've already got a login to our platform. How do we surface information to these guys in a way that makes sense? How do we use CMSs that they already connected with and their data already exists within to surface information directly to the CMS platform? Our biggest question that we're asking our working groups at the moment, and they are full of the shapes and sizes that you're talking about. We don't just have the big boys in the room. We've got the smaller guys as well, because they've got an equal part to play. And we're asking the question, like, how do we best serve this information to you? How do we best access it in a way that not only you can see it, but you're going to trust it? And those are the questions we're asking very much today. And this is why, you talk about the level of investment. There's a quick way to do this with a very small closed loop delivery system. It's like huge levels of adoption, off you go. Or actually there's a longer burn here that makes sure that we enable the darkest corners of all the different stakeholder groups to work in a new way. And ultimately, it'll be their choice about what they do. But if we can make it very, very easy, and if we can unlock value very, very quickly and continue to unlock value along the process, then hopefully it's an easier adoption curve for them, and hopefully it's an easier concept to get your head around. But I think we've not done well as an industry talking about this change. I think we've made it sound really, really hard. we've made it sound really, really expensive. And ultimately, LMS want to do as much of that heavy lifting as humanly possible to make sure that we are enabling that. I mean, our existing clients, we lender clients and law firms, already trust us to provide products and software into the market. We've got a responsibility to continue to engage with those small parts of the community to ensure they get equal access to everything else. We create these huge divides in technology. Is this what we've got today, which is some guys have some efficiency, some people don't, but ultimately the customer still doesn't get a better experience because they're still waiting 6 months to move home.
Having done a number of these podcasts, as I say, on technology, on what's happening in and around the sector, that terrible word prop tech, not my favorite, but what I still see is a lot of buzzwords, a lot of terminology that people don't necessarily completely understand. We are still going through a process of trying to help the profession understand what this change looks like, aren't we?
100%. I think up until September last year, when we launched the pilot with Connells and Peter Allen and the guys in South Wales, this was very much conceptual. There had been no real world example of people trying to work this way in terms of sharing information and using a trust framework to be able to reuse that information as part of that journey. That's one of the reasons why we pushed the launch of the trial so hard and so quickly. We wanted to show that, one, it wasn't a concept anymore, this stuff could be a reality, but two, the physical impact on the different stakeholders in the process, from the customer to the AA, the broker, to the law firms that are involved in it, saying, actually, there's a real world impact here. One, where we're going to unlock the value that we thought we were going to unlock. Two, was going to be as easy as possible. And three, by actually doing it in real life, does that education piece or that that sharing of information piece become easier, so people can see it actually happening with real customers and real cases. And the results from that pilot have been extraordinarily good. The customer experience has been fantastic, and we learned quite a lot. It's not all been sunshine and roses, that's for sure. We've learned a few things on the journey, but we're now feeding that information back into the market, and we're using that to form the basis of our working group conversations. Like, we saw this happen in real life. We need to overcome this problem. How do we do that? Commerciality is a really, really good one. How we share information is a better one. How people access and surface information was even a really, really good example to make it really simple. You're absolutely right. I think there's also, we'll get to a stage at some point in 2025 that unless we start seeing these things move on, people are going to get tired with it. They're going to get exhausted of hearing the word collaboration, and
Technology
interoperability.
fatigue, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I think so. We're very, very keen at moving at the right pace that allows us to build correctly. Build it right first time based upon user feedback, and engage with as many different parts of the process as possible, so they feel engaged and they feel like it's their process that we're helping enable them through our technology resources. And that's why we talk about enablement quite a lot. I think there is definitely a hearts and minds piece, there's definitely an education piece, but I think they'll come from real world results and people engaging with these different technology providers to say, here's what I think the problem is, help me solve it. I think the more feedback that we go and get from those different stakeholders, once we can continue to feedback to them about how we're going to fix that problem, they can kind of get that education piece that you referred to along the way, and we'll get to a stage where actually we're overcoming some of these kind of thoughts about the level of change required to go and deliver this, that actually becomes bite-sized, it becomes tolerable, it becomes something that people can see the value in really, really quickly. It's like, great, how do we engage in that again? But I think there has been a bit of a tiered approach to this in the past. I think where actually the guys who've got their own internal resources can go and invest in these things, and that actually has created probably a larger divide in terms of customer experience and supplier experience. So we need to bridge that divide as best we possibly can do by engaging with those different people, but also just continue to share information. So all of our LMS podcasts, I'm not plugging it on yours, I promise you, David, but all of our PR and marketing, our working groups, all the events that we're attending, we're all there to talk about the same thing. It's like, here's what we're doing. We're really open about this kind of stuff. We're really open about the positives and negatives from the trial and the pilot, the size of the task ahead of us. The working groups that we're doing across all the different stakeholder groups are really focused on engagement and sharing of information. We don't want this to feel at arm's length to anybody. We want these people to feel engaged with this stuff. And it is an open invitation. And we've seen this in the press already, saying, if you want to come and give us your £2 worth, if you want to come and see what we're doing, there's a full open invitation to come join our working groups. Obviously, numbers are limited. We can't put 1,000 people in a room, but it is very much about sharing our knowledge and our experience and the feedback we're getting from the other parts of the organization and industry. But I do think we need to be better as an industry in sharing that information, and we are very much trying to do so. But I do get it. I get the point. I want to make sure we don't see that fatigue set in. because people can see the value being released quickly into the market. And that's my job, really, and the job of the guys around me at LMS to make sure that we are continuing to share and continue to release value as quick as we possibly can.
We've talked a little bit about commerciality in the course of the discussion, and I very deliberately brought it into today's podcast because it's very ethereal to talk about winning hearts and minds. It's quite ethereal to say, well, we need to educate people on what this technology looks like. But if we can demonstrate that by doing this, we put some more numbers on people's bottom line, maybe that's the way that we bring them along on this journey. And you think about estate agents who, if they churned their pipeline another once or 1.5 times over the course of the year, it would have a transformational effect on their businesses. And the same for conveyancers and property lawyers, all of whom don't get paid until that transaction crosses the line. So maybe if we talk about it in those terms, we might be able to get some traction.
I completely agree. I think when I talk about unlocking value, the value is not just customer experience. It is about the commerciality of your organization. People have got, salaries to pay for and things at home they need to do. We live in a commercial world where we all work for a living, and that's the job. And our job is to think about how we continue to unlock that value. The law firms and even the EAs I speak to regularly talk about the level of administration they need to do to complete their jobs. Conveyancers are specialists. They're very, very well trained. They're highly regarded in what they do. And we spend a lot of time chasing information, chasing documentation, redoing stuff that's already been done. At a very, very basic level, if we can just start to reduce the amount of administration that these qualified and senior people need to do every single day, we'll have that positive effect, not just on the bottom line, but on their own mental health, in terms of the tasks that they're doing every single day. Just maybe we can make the process a little bit easier for everybody. And that's the goal. We're not moving away or running away from that commercial conversation. We're very, very clear on that. And a lot of the KPIs around the pilot and trial that we're doing that is looking at efficiency, looking at caseloads, looking at the work that we take away and how all that works from a commerciality point of view and what that means. So you're absolutely right. I think once that trial matures, we'll have more information to share upon that. But even if we just started by reducing some of that administration every single day, already we're starting to make a huge change in the commerciality. That's for sure.
Administration is definitely an interesting conversation point, and it may not be a discussion for right now, but I was chatting to a firm recently where they were managing caseloads, but by using technology, their argument was that you can increase caseloads because you're not doing all of that admin, you're not doing all of that stuff. The reason why the profession has really focused on caseloads is because there's so much work that goes into each individual matter. If actually we reduce a lot of that administration, we may be able to conduct more cases per conveyancer, but more effectively and efficiently.
That's exactly one of the KPIs that exists with the law firms in the trial. Can we increase the number of cases that each caseworker has on the plate in one time by working in this way, in a way where they're not feeling overly burdened or they're not feeling like they're taking on more work, because they are singularly focused on the legal work that needs to happen rather than the administration that sits alongside it. As much as, and again, it's a good one to finish on, David, we are looking at we know how long it takes to onboard a customer in the conveyancing space. We know how long it takes to get documents back. We know how long it takes to get searches back. We know how many phone calls come in from the customer, the EA and the broker in between all those different gaps. That's just time. It's just time that doesn't need to exist in the process. And it's great for these guys to have relationships, but a lot of those phone calls and emails that take place aren't always of a kind of a positive nature. They are chasing emails because people want to know what's going on. People want to move home, and I get the pressure. But there are ways now. It does exist today. It's not concept anymore, where information that's gathered upstream can be shared in a meaningful way and can inform processes downstream. It's real. It exists. We've proven it. And we're not the only ones that have proven it. This is the time. We're at a really, really pivotal point, I think, in our industry where the technology now exists. The resources are being deployed to go and make this a scaled solution, not just within LMS, but across the industry. And actually what we all need is the right level of engagement from those different stakeholders to make sure that what these prop techs, to your point, or the tech companies are building is fit for purpose. It will help solve some of the problems, the confusion, and those bugbears that the different stakeholders have, particularly conveyancers. I remember, and I'll probably finish on this note, Dave, and leave you to it. I remember my first day working for LMS, was getting an overview of the process, and within 20 minutes, I was convinced that conveyancers were the problem. An hour later, I had completely changed my mind in terms of the pressure they're under and the responsibilities that they have, and how many things are kind of passed to them from the other stakeholders to go and sort out. One of the reasons why we've launched so many different products and services, because we know we can support them better as LMS, as an organisation. So the last 5 years, we've released a lot of products that aim to create a little bit of efficiency and take away some of the administration. But the burden on conveyancers is huge, and it's one of our responsibilities is where we sit in the market to try and support them as best way we can do. But again, I'll go back to it. It is an open ask. The more information we get from the market, the more information that conveyancers feed into us, the better our products will become to support them.
A conversation that we could almost certainly have for much of the rest of today, but we're out of time, Travis. It's been great to have you on the podcast and a really interesting discussion. So thanks very much indeed for joining.
My pleasure, David. Thanks for having me.
The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysconveyancer.co.uk. My thanks to Travis. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.